I came back from my trip without saying anything and saw my wife crying on the balcony, my son laughing with his in-laws. I came home a day early that Christmas, thinking I'd surprise them. 30 years of fire calls had trained me to walk quietly into chaos, but nothing prepares you for finding it in your own house. The lights glowed warm, the tree perfect, the scent of lemon polish and pine blending into something too clean, too false. My wife stood on the balcony, crying into the cold. Inside, my son was laughing with his in-laws, champagne in hand, voices slick with confidence. Mrs. Whitmore's tone carried like a sermon. "Evan dear, your father's fireman stories keep them short. Donors prefer polish." My son chuckled, glancing toward the tree. "Of course, we'll steer him to a quieter role." Mr. Whitmore added, "Legacy only matters if it photographs well." Evan nodded. "We'll ease Dad out." Through the glass, my wife looked at me, eyes wet, broken, and whispered, "They practiced it. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you? And where are you listening? They say you can tell a house's truth by its silence. Mine used to hum, furnace low, refrigerator steady, my wife humming under her breath as she wrapped gifts. But that night, December 23rd, the silence was wrong. It had edges. I'd come home a day early from Boise. Supplier meetings wrapped sooner than expected, flights aligned, and I thought stupidly that I'd surprise them. The Lexus rolled down Summit Oaks just after dusk, headlights catching the neat lines of wreaths and white lights that all looked like the same catalog spread. Our windows glowed gold against the cold. I remember thinking, she left the lights on for me. The Starbucks cup in my hand was still warm when I killed the engine. Lemon polish met pine as I stepped inside. The foyer smelled expensive, like the Dior bags under the tree had their own scent. My Omega ticked in my wrist, steady, grounding. Then laughter, not hers. Laughter that came too loud, too practiced from the kitchen, clinking glass, crystal hitting marble. Mrs. Whitmore's voice, the kind that fills rooms, built to echo it. "He's sweet, Evan, but the fireman thing? It reads, provincial. Investors prefer polish." My son, eager, almost tripping over her approval, "We'll steer him to a quieter role." It landed like a nail in drywall, sharp, small, permanent. I froze in the doorway. My wife was outside on the balcony, shoulders trembling. The glass door between us reflected the tree lights on her face, fractured gold across tears. She didn't see me at first. Or maybe she did and wished she hadn't. I didn't move. 30 years running toward alarms had wired me for action, but this wasn't a fire you charge into. It was one you watched, quietly, to learn where it started. Mrs. Whitmore kept talking. "Optics, Evan. Every family has to decide how it wants to look. Think Hamptons, not hardware." My throat went dry. All those years of crawling through smoke and drywall, missing holidays so other people could have theirs, and now I was a branding problem. Through the glass, my wife finally looked up. Her eyes found mine. One small shake of her head. "Not now, please." The boy from the split level flashed through my mind, the one I'd carried out under a sky the same color as ash. He'd clung to me so tight I could feel his heartbeat through my turnout coat. When the chief handed me the commendation later, all I'd kept was the smell of soot that lived in my jacket for months. That smell meant purpose. Now, standing in my own hallway, all I could smell was lemon and money. I took a slow breath, set my coffee cup down on the console so gently the lid didn't rattle, and listened. Evan again softer. "We'll help him retire with dignity. People respect that. Retire. Like I was a broken hydrant they could quietly replace before guests arrived." The air in the room felt thinner. My hand brushed my cuff one pine needle from somewhere on the porch, clinging stubbornly. That's what service is, I thought. You bring pieces of the real world home with you, even when it doesn't match the decor. No one noticed me in the doorway. Not my son, not the family that thought they'd upgraded him. Only my wife, trapped between loyalty and survival, trying to cry without making a sound. I looked at her one last time, then back at the people I used to think were my own. The perfect wall of our family had cracked, just enough for truth to slip through. I set my coffee down so gently the lid didn't even rattle, and decided to listen harder than I had in years. The balcony door slid open with the soft sound of surrender. Cold air brushed against the back of my neck as I stepped outside, trading the smell of champagne and lemon polish for pine and frost. My wife didn't turn around. She stood there gripping the railing, shoulders shaking under the glow of the Christmas lights she'd hung herself. "They practiced it," she whispered, voice thin as smoke. "The toast. About you." I waited. The lights from the living room spilled across the glass, flickering with each laugh. "They said they'll professionalize the family brand." That's what they called it. Her words caught on the word brand, like it burned her tongue. He, your son, stood there and nodded. Inside, Mr. Whitmore's voice rose above the piano. "Legacy is capital, Evan refine, or remove the parts that don't photograph well." And Evan, my boy, answered like an intern eager to please. "We'll ease Dad out." Ease me out. Like a smudge on their invitation list. My wife's mascara had bled into thin black rivers down her cheeks. "I tried to stop it," she said, "but they made it sound so reasonable." She turned to me finally, eyes red, lips trembling in that half apology, half warning that only comes from someone who's lived too long in polite cruelty. I reached for her hand. It was cold, stiff, like she'd been holding herself together too tightly for too long. "You don't have to stop them," I said. "We're done letting people like that decide how we exist." Behind the glass, Mrs. Whitmore's laugh was bright and brittle. "Evan, darling, when you speak at the gala, make sure you mention your father's service, but keep it short. Blue-collar stories can feel grim." I exhaled through my nose. The sound felt louder than it should have been. In my mind, I heard something else entirely, the scratch of a Mont Blanc pen on thick paper. My old fire captain, filling out the commendation letter after that 3-alarm warehouse blaze. His handwriting was slow, deliberate. He wrote one line I never forgot, steady in heat. I looked at my wife and said, "Pack a bag." She blinked. "What?" 10 minutes. My voice stayed low. "We leave tonight." She stared at me like she wasn't sure if I meant it. Maybe she'd forgotten what it sounded like when I decided something. "Walter?" 10 minutes. I gave her hand a squeeze. "Please." Through the glass, the Whitmores were still performing their dress rehearsal of superiority. Evan raising an imaginary glass. His fiancée's parents nodding like casting directors who'd found their leading man. They had no idea that their script ended tonight. I took out my phone and opened the group thread with my operations team. The night was quiet enough to hear the tiny buzz of the keys as I typed, "Stand by, 24 hours." The message sent. Delivered. Read. A church bell rang faintly from down the hill. Midnight service prep. Another Christmas Eve for everyone else. My wife stepped inside, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I followed her just far enough to close the balcony door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt final. She paused at the hallway. "You really mean it?" "Yes." "Where will we go?" "Someplace that doesn't smell like money pretending to be manners." She gave the smallest laugh, wet, broken, real. Inside, they toasted again. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I looked at my reflection in the glass, the man they called provincial. The man they were about to underestimate one last time. 10 minutes, I said, and meant a lifetime. The clock over the stove ticked like it was counting down to something no one else knew was coming. 4:07 a.m. I hadn't slept. The house was still the kind of silence you get before the world resets itself. My wife was upstairs packing what little she wanted to keep. I sat at the kitchen island with my MacBook Air, a mug of coffee going cold beside me, and started what I've always been best at, quiet, steady work. Chase first, then Bank of America. The logins came easy years of muscle memory. 2 accounts, 2 transfers, routed into the trust I'd drafted months ago. It had just been waiting for a reason. Now it had one. The screen blinked confirmation. Completed. No traga. Just bookkeeping. Somewhere down the hall I heard a voice. Evans. Faint. Filtered through the half-closed office door. "Yeah," he murmured. "He's sentimental about the union crews he'll fold." A pause. Then the syrupy rumble of Mr. Whitmore on speaker. "We'll put his pension face on the brochure. Good optics for investors." My hand hovered over the keyboard. For a moment all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint whistle of wind through the vent. Pension face. Like 30 years of crawling through fire and smoke was a prop in their marketing kit. I didn't walk in there, didn't shout, didn't correct him. You don't yell at a storm, you shut the windows, check the foundation, and wait it out. Close, I muttered to myself, fingers back on the keys. Change. Confirm. Vendor portals next auto renewals canceled. Deliveries rescheduled. Clauses cited cleanly, like a surgeon's cuts. To the school district, I sent one message. Maintenance review. Pause per contract clause 4.2. Neutral tone. Legal backbone. I knew exactly how many signatures were on those contracts, and whose names weren't. Every motion was deliberate. One click to revoke Evan's access credentials. Another to arm the Ring cameras at both warehouses, pushing the updated master code to my phone. I sipped coffee. Bitter. Good. The gray edge of dawn pressed against the window. I could see the neighbor's frozen lawn glittering under the streetlight. When I was younger, we'd call that fire frost, the way it caught light and refused to die down even when it should have. And suddenly, memory bled in the night we lost the roof on the Elm Street blaze. Soot falling like gray snow, quiet after chaos. I'd learned something then. Control what you can reach. Everything else will burn or heal without your help. The laptop chimed a new email. From my lawyer's office. Trust activation received. Time-stamped 4:40. 1 a.m. I smiled at the efficiency. Next, a short message to my operations manager. Delay payroll until new authorization file uploaded. Confirm direct approval from me. No explanation. She wouldn't need one. Loyal people never do. The old kitchen clock ticked again. A soft, hollow sound that seemed to echo a heartbeat. I reached for the envelope beside me, plain white, no name. Inside, a new set of keys and a note written in my neat block letters. Change the locks today. Don't tell anyone where you're going until I call. I placed it on the counter where the morning light would find it first. Outside, the first bird sang a single, confused note against the cold. I closed the laptop, slid my chair back, and stood in the half-dark kitchen surrounded by the hum of a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. By the time the sun touched the neighbor's frozen lawn, the lights they liked to pose under were mine to turn off. Summit Oaks Country Club smelled like wealth trying too hard to be effortless lemon polish, overwaxed floors, and poinsettias so bright they looked fake. I pulled into the circle drive behind a new BMW, my old Mercedes idling with a soft rattle that didn't belong here. The valet didn't even glance at me. He leapt toward the BMW, eyes lighting up when he saw the Whitmores step out. I waited. Habit. 30 years in the fire service teaches you patience around people who run toward the wrong fires. Inside, the ballroom glittered. Chandeliers, crystal, linen, the works. Christmas Eve brunch, because for people like the Whitmores, nothing says piety like champagne at noon. Mrs. Whitmore spotted me before I reached the receiving line. Walter, darling, she cooed, the word darling sliding over me like an ice cube. You must be exhausted from all your brave work. Her manicured hand fluttered near my sleeve like she might catch something if she touched it. I've had longer nights, I said, offering a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Whitmore clapped my shoulder, the kind of pat that was meant to look friendly and feel condescending. Still keeping the old place running, I hear. You're quite the loyalist. Admirable. Behind them, Evan looked polished. Suit tailored, tie perfect, his future written in imported wool. When he saw me, his smile flickered, then reset. Dad, glad you made it, he said, but the words came with a warning tone. Behave. We joined the table at the center, under the biggest chandelier, the one that cast gold light just harsh enough to make everyone look a little unreal. The waiter poured mimosas. Mrs. Whitmore leaned across the table, smiling so wide it almost cracked her makeup. Walter, we were just saying how colorful your old firehouse stories are. So brave, really. But for the donors tonight, she lowered her voice to a stage whisper, let's keep the soot off the Cartier bracelets, The table laughed. A polite, restrained laughter. I felt the floor tilt. My son, my own blood, glanced at her, then at me. Mom's right, he said quickly. Optics, you know. That one landed deeper than I expected. I stared at him for half a second too long, long enough for him to fidget. He reached for his drink, avoiding my eyes. You get it, Dad. I didn't nod. I saw every detail around me too sharply. A loose thread on Mr. Whitmore's cuff, the perfect bubbles rising in Mrs. Whitmore's glass, the way Evan's fiancée shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My wife reached under the table, brushed my hand once, a quiet plea not to make a scene. She didn't understand. There was no scene to make. I'd already seen everything I needed. In my head, a different Christmas flickered. My crew back at Station 17, grinning under cheap paper crowns from a gas station convenience store. The smell of burnt coffee, the sound of laughter echoing off tile walls, real laughter that didn't check for cameras or donors first. We'd eaten canned chili that year, and it still tasted better than this. I took a slow sip of water, swallowed the burn of humiliation, and reached for my phone. Under the tablecloth, my thumb hovered over one text thread. My lawyer's name at the top. I typed a single word: proceed. Simple, clean, irreversible. Then I lifted my head, smiled for the camera as the waiter leaned in to take a photo of our perfect little family, and thought, I just started the quietest fire I'd ever set. Gold uplights poured over the ballroom like honey warm, flattering and false. The kind of light that hides cracks instead of fixing them. The Hale Family Gala banner hung above the stage. My name in serif font, polished until it barely looked like something that came from a man who used to carry hoses and swing axes. Evan stood at the microphone, perfectly tailored, perfectly rehearsed. My son, the boy who used to run around Station 17 wearing my old fire helmet like it was a crown. He adjusted his cufflink and smiled at the crowd. Cameras flashed. Tonight, he began, we honor tradition, but we're moving the Hale name into the future with polish and partners who understand scale. The word but was the cut. Everything before it, tradition, honor, family, was throat-clearing. Everything after it was the knife. Mrs. Whitmore beamed from the front row, pearls gleaming against her collarbone. Her husband nodded, smug as if watching a well-executed acquisition. My wife's hand found mine under the table. Her grip was trembling, her nails cold. Evan kept going. We couldn't do this without our new partners, the Whitmore Group, whose vision and resources are helping us take Hale Mechanical into new markets. A pause. A camera shutter clicked. Someone from the veterans table called out, Where's your dad, son? Evan didn't flinch. He's stepping back. A ripple went through the room. Quiet. Curious. A few sympathetic glances. Others confused. Stepping back. Not retired. Not honored. Just replaced. I felt the blood drain from my hands, leaving them steady. My wife looked at me, eyes wide with apology. I squeezed her fingers once, not to comfort but to signal. I heard it. It's done. The smell hit me suddenly, leather and sweat, the inside of a fire helmet that had seen too many nights. A memory rose, sharp and clear. A man trapped in an attic collapse, me shouting through the radio, one word that cut through panic and noise. Now, that word had saved lives. It meant move. It meant act. The applause started thin, hesitant, then growing. People clapped because that's what polite people do when they don't know the truth. I rose from my chair, slow and measured. My wife whispered, Walter, don't. But this wasn't a confrontation. It was command. I stepped back, out of the light, into the shadows near the hallway doors. My phone buzzed in my palm, the vibration like a heartbeat. I opened the group threads I'd prepared weeks ago, the ones no one else knew existed. To my attorney, execute Trust Clause 7. B. Notify counsel for Whitmore Group and Summit Oaks Management. To my operations manager, freeze brand assets. No external use until further notice. To the school board, the union, the VFW commander, pause all partnership signage, pending review. One message after another left my phone like sparks leaving a fuse, each one timed, clean, emotionless. Up on stage, Evan kept talking. Words like innovation and legacy integration spilled from his mouth, phrases he'd learned from people who measure meaning in billable hours. My wife was still seated, eyes on me now, realization dawning. She knew that look. The one from the firehouse, the moment before a controlled demolition. My attorney's email dinged back within minutes. Subject line clear. Hale name use commerce veto activated. Copies sent to venue, sponsors, and family office. Perfect. Surgical. Evan finished his speech, smile fixed. Applause again, brighter this time, but thinner somehow. He looked relieved, triumphant. He didn't notice me slipping out the side door, coat over my arm, phone cooling in my hand. When my son said I was stepping back, I took him at his word and stepped on the brake. The day after the gala, the city felt sharper cold light on glass, wind tunneling down the avenues. I sat in the lobby of my attorney's midtown office. Coffee so burnt it tasted like punishment, and waited. Sirens wailed somewhere 2 floors below, a reminder that not all emergencies wear flames. Upstairs, Whitmore's counsel was already on the phone. I could hear his voice bleeding through the hallway vent, clipped and furious. "He can't do that," he snapped. My attorney's answer floated back, calm as weathered oak. "He already did." I smiled into my cup. It wasn't satisfaction, it was confirmation. The system was moving. The ecosystem I'd built wasn't a theory anymore. It was an engine, and all I had to do was release the pressure. First call, the VFW commander. Old Marine, bad knees, sharper mind than half the town council. "We'll host the veterans fundraiser at the armory instead," I told him. "Safer, easier parking." He paused. "Copy that, Cap. You all right?" "Better than I've been in years," I said, and meant it. Next, email to the school board council. Conflict review triggered per clause 8.1, HVAC vendor overlap with Whitmore affiliates. Pause work until audit complete. I wrote it like a man folding shirts, precise, unhurried, leaving space between the lines. Third, a text to the union rep. "Safety stand down Friday, all Whitmore sites." He replied instantly, "That'll rattle them." I typed back, "That's the idea." By noon, my MacBook was open to the motel board Zoom. I'd helped found that place half investment, half community gesture. "We'll need to cancel the Whitmore holiday block," I said. Quietly, no announcement, just scheduling conflicts. The manager hesitated, eyes darting to the other trustees. "Understood," she said finally. "Quiet reasons." The elevator dinged behind me, a soft mechanical sigh. I caught my reflection in its scuffed chrome gray at the temples, shoulders a little bent but steady. Not the man they'd dismissed as sentimental. A man relearning what leverage feels like when it's used for correction, not control. In my head, I saw the memory again, the hose unspooling in the street, muscle memory and rhythm, no panic. You train long enough, and your body knows the work, even when your mind is still catching up. This was no different. Service was service, whether it was putting out fires or exposing one. My attorney appeared beside me, tie slightly askew, carrying a folder thicker than it should have been. "All filings complete," he said. "You've effectively locked down Hale Mechanical's naming rights, vendor contracts, and sponsorship use. They can't transact without triggering breach clauses." "And the subpoena?" He slid an envelope across the table. "Draft ready, SPV records. You'll appreciate the CC line." I took it, opened it. Evan's name sat there, copied alongside the Whitmore family office. A quiet way of saying, "You're in this now, son." "Deliver it," I said. He nodded and walked away, already dialing. Phones buzzed, printers clicked, heels echoed on marble. The city hummed with indifferent motion. Upstairs, Whitmore's counsel barked again, "We'll litigate!" And my attorney's voice answered, level as before, "Please do." Downstairs, I finished the coffee, folded the empty cup flat, and dropped it into the bin. Every action, every message, every polite cancellation wasn't vengeance, it was correction. Paperwork, not fireworks. Every no I gave them made room for the one yes I needed from myself. Rumors move faster than truth, but slower than respect. By Tuesday morning, both were already working in my favor. It started on the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group, the same place people used to argue about trash pickup and Christmas lights. Someone posted, "Did anyone else notice Hale Mechanical pulled its sponsorship from the Whitmore Gala?" A moderator deleted it within minutes. But screenshots live longer than good intentions. By lunchtime, half the town had seen it. At the credit union, where everyone knows everyone's business, I was depositing a check when I caught the whisper. The teller leaned toward her coworker, voice low but not low enough. "Did you hear?" Walter pulled the plug. Her colleague raised an eyebrow. Good for him. About time someone reminded those folks who built this town. I didn't say a word, just smiled faintly, slid my deposit slip forward. The pen on its little chain clinked once tiny sound, big echo. Down the street at Truman's Diner, I heard another version. A contractor at the counter said, Whitmore dragged us through cost overruns all summer. Walter? He paid us on time, even for overtime. Someone else grunted. Guy's old school. Doesn't need a lawyer to tell him what fair means. Evan showed up there later that afternoon. Lexus still shining from the city detail shop, tie loosened for effect. He tried to laugh it off, shake hands, buy coffee. People looked away. The air thickened with the kind of politeness that's worse than anger. You can't argue with silence. By evening, Facebook murmurs had turned into quiet consensus. Not loud, not dramatic, just the slow pivot of heads toward someone they already trusted. The country club manager called me personally. Walter, he began, all professional caution. I think we should postpone Saturday's gala. Optics, you know. Oh. I didn't respond right away. 5 seconds of silence can do more work than any threat. He filled it himself. Understood. I'll handle it. On my desk sat a small stack of mail I hadn't opened yet. One envelope, cream-colored and worn at the edges, caught my eye. I knew it before I even opened it. A thank-you note from years ago, written by a widow after we'd delivered an oxygen tank to her husband at midnight during a storm. Her handwriting wobbled but clear. You didn't have to. I'd kept it in my glove box ever since. Now, watching the Whitmore's empire tremble, that note came back to me like a quiet anchor. 30 years of showing up, one late-night call at a time. People remember that. Maybe not with parades, but with phone calls, decisions, small acts of loyalty that don't need explaining. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Evan. Voicemail. Dad, call me, please. This isn't how I meant it to go. I didn't listen to the rest. Not yet. Then came the leak. A screenshot from an internal email chain, Mrs. Whitmore's words in black and white. We can't have dirty boots near the donors. By sundown, it was everywhere. In group chats, at the firehouse, even in the comments under a photo of the town's nativity scene. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't need to. The town had decided. Not because I was rich or loud, but because I'd been there when it counted. You can't buy that kind of memory, and you sure as hell can't erase it with polish. The first time I saved a life, no one clapped either. The knock came before sunrise. 2 short raps, 1 long, hesitant. The kind you give when you're not sure you should be there. The Ring camera caught him Evan standing in the half-light, coat thrown over sweats, hair messy, eyes ringed like he hadn't slept. I watched the feed for a second longer than I needed to, then hit unlock. The metal bay door groaned open, the heater rattling in protest as cold air slid across the shop floor. Evan stepped inside, shoving his hands into his pockets like he was still a kid waiting for permission. He wasn't. Not anymore. Dad, he said, voice rough, you embarrassed me. I looked up from the workbench. The stack of invoices and drafts still spread out like a map. I protected the name you're standing on, I said. He scoffed, pacing. You think this is noble? You blindsided us in front of everyone. They say you're vindictive. They? The Whitmores. Investors. Everyone. His voice cracked on the word everyone. Maybe stop building your world out of people who benefit when you fall, I said quietly. He dragged a hand through his hair, the motion too young for the suit jacket thrown over his hoodie. You're freezing me out of my own company. Our company, I corrected. But I'm the one who kept the roof from burning. Oh. He moved closer, anger replacing exhaustion. This isn't you, Dad. You don't pull strings behind the scenes. You talk to people. You fix things. I nodded. You're right, so let's fix something. From the drawer, I pulled 3 documents clipped neatly. The heater clanked again behind us, filling the silence. This is a copy of the trust clause you tried to override, I said, sliding the first page across the table. This one's the subpoena draft. Whitmore SPV records. Transactions tied to the redevelopment fund. He frowned, skimming without focus. I don't understand what this... Look at the memo lines. He did. And then he stopped. The 3rd page was the real one, the Bank of America statement. Transfer after transfer, small amounts at first, then bigger, all tagged with the same notation. Consulting EMH, his initials. His eyes lifted. wide and sick. They said it was incentive, part of my salary structure. Son, I said, steady, not cruel. They used you to wash money through a shell company. You didn't even get the good end of it. He stared at the paper like it might catch fire. You're lying. I wish I were. The heater sputtered again, filling the quiet. Somewhere outside, a garbage truck beeped, a sound that belonged to simpler mornings back when this shop smelled like rubber and soap instead of betrayal. I studied his face, and for a moment I saw a different version of him. The boy who used to bring me cold pizza to station 17 after late shifts, cheeks smudged with grease from tinkering with his bike. He'd once taped a NASA sticker to his school folder and told me he wanted to fix things that go to space. Somewhere along the line, someone convinced him that fixing things wasn't glamorous enough. He pushed the papers back toward me. I didn't know. I believe you, I said. But belief doesn't erase signatures. He nodded once, jaw tight, tears unshed but close. Then he turned and walked toward the door. He didn't slam it, just pulled it shut, quiet, respectful, progress. On the desk, the papers sat between us like a mirror. And for once, he didn't look away first. The conference room smelled like new paper and burnt espresso, two things that always mean trouble. Midtown skyline out the window, glass table in front of us, steam curling up from street grates below. Whitmore's counsel had arrived early, spread out her folders like she was preparing for surgery. Heavy stock letter on top, embossed logo catching the light. You will rescind, she said, sliding it across the table. My attorney didn't reach for it right away. She just uncapped her Mont Blanc, glanced at me once, and said evenly, We will not. That was the sound of a match being struck in a room full of oxygen. Mr. Whitmore's voice came through the speaker in the center of the table, slick and low. Walter, be reasonable. This is bad for everyone's image. I leaned in slightly, voice steady. Image isn't a value, service is. Across from me, Evan sat with his hands folded too tightly, trying to look calm. He'd traded his hoodie for a navy suit, but the tremor in his thumb gave him away. My attorney slid a single binder toward the Whitmore side. Exhibits A through F, she said. Trust restatement, trademark assignment, venue contracts, vendor terminations. Each filed, time-stamped, and notarized. You'll find the corresponding emails in chronological order, including Mr. Hale's advisories. The other counsel flipped through, color draining like someone had opened a window. This doesn't... It does, my attorney said, cutting clean. And it's all dated before your client's supposed partnership vote. The silence that followed was worth every sleepless night leading up to it. I reached for the coffee at my elbow, black, no sugar. A stray fingerprint smudge caught the reflection of the ceiling lights on the glass tabletop mine. A reminder that fingerprints don't lie, and neither do time-stamped filings. Whitmore's counsel cleared her throat. You realize we'll file for injunction? Of course, my attorney said. And you'll lose. You can't unsign a trademark you never owned. Evan spoke then, voice softer than I'd heard it in months. Dad, maybe if we just... Evan, I said quietly, look at the memo dates. They were moving money under your initials. You were never in charge. You were cover. He didn't answer, just stared at the pages, the lines of fine print that might as well have been an epitaph. His confidence so bright under the chandeliers that night faded to something smaller. Mister, Whitmore's voice crackled again through the speaker. This is your last chance to walk away without a fight. My attorney smiled faintly. We're already seated. Outside, sirens wailed up the avenue. Inside, the only sound was paper being turned. Paper doesn't shout. It just sits there, calm, factual, undefeated. When the meeting ended, Whitmore's counsel left without shaking hands. Evan lingered. They said they'll sue you into the ground, he murmured. I opened my phone, scrolled once, and sent him a single reply, a screenshot of my litigation insurance binder. Then I pocketed the phone. Tell them to check my coverage limits. He didn't smile, but something flickered respect, maybe, or exhaustion. That afternoon, my attorney filed the subpoena formally. 10 business days for the Whitmore family office to produce SPV ledgers. Evan's name appeared in the CC line. 10 days. 10 days. I drove home past the station, sunlight glinting off the old memorial plaque where my captain's name still shone faintly. Powdered creamer and black coffee came back to me from those nights when we stopped expecting praise and just did the job. Paper doesn't raise its voice, and that's why it wins. The Hamptons looked exactly like you'd expect them to, white on white, money arranged to look effortless. The valet stuck a bright VIP tag on my old Mercedes like he was pinning a name tag on a stray dog. Inside, the Whitmore's beach house gleamed, ocean framed perfectly by glass, every piece of furniture whispering, "Photo op." Mrs. Whitmore glided toward me in linen and understatement, wrist tilted just enough for the Tiffany bracelet to catch the light. "Walter, darling," she said, smile warm enough to thaw a pond, but not deep enough to swim in. "A truce. Christmas should be aspirational." "Mister." Whitmore poured scotch into crystal, practiced ease. "We thought a weekend together might smooth things over. Family first, right?" Evan hovered by the window, hands buried in his pockets, eyes darting between us like a kid at a parent-teacher meeting gone wrong. I set my phone face down on the coffee table, glass against glass. "Sure," I said, tone mild. "Let's aspire to honesty." Mrs. Whitmore's laugh had too many notes in it. "Oh, Walter, always so serious." "I used to be," I said. "Serious keeps buildings from burning." They didn't get the reference, or they pretended not to. Saturday. A platter of canapés appeared, too symmetrical to eat. The conversation circled words like reset, collaboration, joint statement. Mr. Whitmore talked about public image and shared legacy. Mrs. Whitmore chimed in. A few photos together would quiet the noise. People love redemption arcs. I sipped water, not scotch. "Photos," I repeated. "Of course, for content." "Oh." Across the room, a loose shell on the windowsill rattled in a draft, small and honest in a space full of performance. My phone buzzed once, twice, against the glass table. I glanced at the screen. The VFW Post had just announced the new venue for the Veterans fundraiser, the Armory. My name attached, Whitmore's conspicuously absent. Another ping. The school board published a conflict of interest memo, citing the Whitmore affiliate contracts. Third alert. A diner gossip thread now turned local news headline, "Hail Name Clears Partnerships." While we sat under chandeliers pretending to heal, my ecosystem was already moving clean, lawful, silent. Mrs. Whitmore leaned closer, voice soft. "We'd like one family photo before dinner, just to show goodwill." Evan's throat worked. "Dad, it's nothing, just optics." I looked at him and for a second saw that same boy who used to hand me cold pizza at Station 17, grease on his cheeks. Somewhere between then and now, he'd learned to call sincerity optics. "I don't stand in frames I didn't build," I said. The room tightened. Mr. Whitmore set down his glass, too carefully. "Walter, this posturing helps no one." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe stop relying on posts." Right then, another buzz. Screenshots, banners coming down at the Armory, sponsors peeling off, quietly and efficiently. The kind of work that doesn't make noise but changes everything. Mrs. Whitmore's phone chimed seconds later. She read the alert, color draining just enough to show through the bronzer. Evan looked from her to me, realization dawning like something heavy settling on his shoulders. He wasn't the architect of anything here. He was the prop they'd placed between me and the camera. Outside, the surf rolled in and out, indifferent. The Whitmores were still talking about redemption, reputation, narrative. I stood, thanked them for the invitation, and walked toward the door. Their ocean view was lovely. The tide going out back home was lovelier. The Midtown Hotel ballroom smelled like anxiety disguised as citrus polish. Chandeliers blazed overhead, too bright for a weekday morning. A sign outside the door read Emergency Shareholder Assembly, Whitmore Holdings SPV. I checked in, signed my name in small block letters, and left my Omega hand visible as I adjusted my cuff. Steady hands, calm crowds. Inside, the chairs were lined up military tight. I could tell by the angle of the microphones that this wasn't a meeting, it was theater. Mrs. Whitmore sat near the front, pearls in combat formation. Mr. Whitmore leaned forward at the table, smile polished, eyes sharp. Evan was beside him, shoulders drawn tight, pretending to look busy with his notes. The room hummed lawyers, donors, junior execs, whispering in practiced concern. A mic squealed. Then came the show. Whitmore Council, all blazer and precision, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "there has been a malign influence damaging our family enterprise, an individual manipulating optics, undermining trust, and jeopardizing investor confidence." Her hand rose in my direction, open palm, perfect posture. "Influence," she continued smoothly. "That feeds on division and rumor. We are here to reaffirm unity and integrity." Programs rustled. A few heads turned toward me. Others avoided looking altogether. Manufactured outrage always smells faintly of fear. When she finished, Mr. Whitmore clasped her shoulder and leaned toward the microphone. "We won't let legacy be weaponized. Family business is about vision, not vendettas." Applause. Scattered but eager. Evan didn't clap. I stood. No theatrics, no rush, just movement. The same way I used to stand during firehouse briefings when you know your words will matter, because you'll only use what oxygen you need. "May I?" I asked, stepping forward. The council hesitated. Briefly, I nodded, set my folder on the table, and clicked open a single binder. 3 sheets. That's all it ever takes when they expect drama and you bring documentation. "Influence has names," I said, voice even, steady through the mic's frayed foam cover. "And invoices." The first page, Whitmore Family Office Transfer Memo, June 12, $48,000. Consulting fee, EMH. I let the letters hang. Evan's initials. Second vendor overbilling statement, July 8, $120,000, $500, facility coordination, 3x market rate. Signed by Mr. Whitmore himself. Third charitable event ledger, September 3, Armory Gala, sponsorship withdrawn post-contract breach. I didn't raise my voice, just read. 3 lines. Then I stopped and let the silence do what anger never could. Phones came up in the back row. Reporters, maybe bloggers. Didn't matter. Once light hits truth, it doesn't go dark again. Somewhere to my left, a donor whispered not quietly enough, "That's fraud if true." And suddenly, the oxygen in the room shifted. Conversations splintered. A few people pulled out their own copies of the shareholder packet, flipping pages that no longer felt safe. Evan's eyes darted toward me. Not anger this time, something closer to understanding, or maybe dread. The first crack in the marble. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. "This is selective interpretation." My attorney, seated 2 rows behind, spoke up without looking at him. "Chain of custody on all documents has been verified. Discovery logs available for review." That word discovery landed harder than any accusation could. I closed the folder, slid it back into the briefcase. "That's all I have," I said. "I'll let you get back to your optics." No applause. Just the quiet clicking of pens, the shuffle of people pretending to take notes so they wouldn't have to pick a side out loud. As I walked out, I caught the metallic tang in my mouth, the old memory of the SCBA mouthpiece from the firehouse. The taste of air when the room's too hot, but you keep breathing anyway. Rooms don't have to like you to listen to you. Summit Oaks shimmered the way denial always does, too bright, too polished, just this side of brittle. The Christmas gala was supposed to be their reset, their we're still in control night. The Whitmores had rebranded it as a celebration of generosity, but the first thing I noticed walking in was how dim the chandeliers looked. Someone had trimmed the lighting budget. The floral displays were smaller, too. Fewer lilies, more filler greenery. Money had moved, quietly like it always does when trouble comes dressed as glamour. At the check-in table, the coordinator gave me a name badge that read Walter Hale Guest, not founder, not partner, just guest. It made me smile. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with the sound of nervous wealth. Sequins glinted under softer bulbs. Glasses clinked too loudly. Phones flashed from the corners as people filmed the room, not the cause. The Neighborhood Watch Facebook thread was already humming screens, lighting up with posts like, "Summit Oaks looks half empty," and "Didn't Hale Mechanical sponsor this last year?" I stayed near the exit. Always do. You learn at fire scenes that the safest spot isn't the center of attention, it's the door. From the stage, Mrs. Whitmore took the microphone, sequined and smiling the way only desperation can sparkle. "Tonight," she began, voice thick with champagne, "is about generosity. A contractor in the back muttered, just loud enough for 3 people to hear and one to post, "Generous with our bills." I caught the faint whiff of old perfume, a note of lilac and smoke that didn't belong here. It hit me like a ghost. My late captain's wife at his memorial, hugging me too long, eyes red but steady. That was grief, raw and human. This? This was pageantry built on pretense. Evan found me by the bar. His tie was crooked, his eyes worse. "Call it off," he whispered. "Please, this is already falling apart." I looked at him. "You started it." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The kind of silence that means you've started hearing yourself. "On stage, Mrs." Whitmore tried to laugh off a glitch in the sound system. "We've had a year of challenges," she said, "but we remain united." Behind her, one of the screens flickered, momentary static washing over her face. Even the Edison bulb above the bar began to flicker, one sharp blink every few seconds like it was winking at the truth. At 8:42, my attorney walked in. Tailored gray suit, expression like weather before rain. In her hand, a single manila envelope. She didn't approach the stage. She didn't need to. She made her way toward me through the crowd, people parting instinctively the way they do when they sense order about to enter chaos. "Executive summary," she murmured, handing it over. "Charts and memo lines. Easy reading, filed and time-stamped." Inside was the forensic accountant's report, 1 page. Clear enough for any ballroom donor to follow. Transfers, shell entities, consulting fees marked with family initials. Every color-coded bar a story, every total a verdict. I didn't read it aloud, didn't need to. By then a few phones had already caught the header as she passed it to me. Whitmore Family Office, internal summary, preliminary findings. Screenshots spread faster than champagne bubbles. From the podium, Mrs. Whitmore's voice wavered. We are committed to transparency," someone whispered. "Guess they'll need it." Evan stared at me like he wanted to say something impossible. I just gave a small nod, the kind you give before a controlled burn. They turned up the music, then strings swelling, brass too bright, and somehow it made the silence louder. The ballroom was too quiet for a party. Chandeliers hung like witnesses, light trembling over half-finished drinks and faces trying to decide what side of history they were on. Mrs. Whitmore stood stiff near the podium, smile lacquered in place, the microphone waiting for her next line that wouldn't land. I walked past her without touching it. "I won't take long," I said, my voice steady enough to carry without echo. "I just want to tell a story." I told them about the night we pulled a man from a burning duplex. Smoke so thick it bent the air. My captain shouting orders through a radio that barely worked. The sound of a child crying behind drywall. I talked about the crew, about duty, about how we used to say, "You don't have to be loud to save someone, you just have to be there." The room softened, just slightly. Hands folded, glasses lowered. "That's all," I said. "Service matters. The rest is paperwork." Then I turned, not to the crowd, but to the club manager standing near the buffet table, confusion flickering behind his professionalism. I handed him the envelope, the same manila one from the night before. "This belongs to the club," I said. "It concerns tonight's sponsors." He hesitated. Mrs. Whitmore lunged for the microphone. "This is slander." The manager raised a hand. "It's a financial summary," he said, voice flat, neutral, impossible to spin. He opened the envelope, unfolded the single-page report, and began to read. The screen behind him came to life, projector lights slicing the air, displaying columns of numbers, names, memo lines. June 12. Consulting fee $48,000. EMH, he read. July 8. Facility coordination, $120,500. Whitmore Holdings, triple invoice. September 3. Charitable round trip, $76,400. Return to originating account. Each word landed like a slow heartbeat. You could hear the air thin. Mrs. Whitmore tried to speak again, but her voice caught. Mr. Whitmore reached for his scotch, hand trembling. I said only once quietly, "My name isn't a napkin." The crowd rippled. Someone near the back gasped. Another whispered, "That's fraud if proven." Evan's eyes found the screen just as his initials appeared. E-M-H. He froze. His mouth opened, then closed. Then he looked at me with the hollow recognition of a man realizing which bridge was already burning. Two sponsors stood up and walked out, the sound of chair legs scraping against marble loud as thunder. A donor near the front clapped once, then twice. The sound spread not applause, not mockery, just acknowledgement. Mrs. Whitmore stepped back from the mic, color draining under the gold light. Her husband murmured something about misunderstandings, about pending reviews, but the words felt small in a room that had already decided. Outside the tall windows, a child pressed his nose against the frosted glass, watching the grown-ups stumble through consequences they couldn't spin. The innocence of it hit me harder than anything said inside. I looked down at my hands, still steady. I thought of the hush after a fire's out, the smoke drifting, the quiet that follows when destruction's done and all that's left is cleanup. There's relief in endings that finish clean. Security wasn't needed. The crowd policed itself polite, efficient, surgical. By the time I left, the band had stopped pretending to play. Truth didn't need me to shout. It just needed me to stand still. Winter came early that year, not with snow, but with silence. The kind of social cold that doesn't shout. It just stops returning calls. By Monday, the local news was running a soft focus segment titled Allegations Prompt Review of Community Partnerships. They never said fraud. They didn't have to. The footage showed the Summit Oaks banner coming down, the Armory sign going up, the narrator's tone gentle but final. At the school board office, Mr. Whitmore called the chairperson directly. I know because she told me later, her voice still tight with disbelief. He said, "This is personal," she recounted. And I told him, "We prefer it professional." That was the sound of a door closing politely and locking. Next came the Chamber of Commerce email, subject line, Ethics Reaffirmation, 2 sentences long, unsigned but understood. Every sponsor knew which way the wind was blowing. The chamber doesn't pick sides. It just adjusts its compass to true north. At Truman's Diner, the same waitress who'd once avoided my table came over without a word and refilled my coffee. Patted my shoulder once, then left me to it. That small touch carried more weight than any headline. I read the comments that night on the Neighborhood Watch thread. Someone had started a post. "To the Hale crews, thank you for the work you do. Sorry some of us forgot." It grew into a chain of photos, repairs, fire calls, small acts of service, each one with the same quiet tone, remembrance. My name barely appeared. It didn't need to. The Whitmore house went dark on social media. No holiday photos, no brunches. The charity tags disappeared. Their PR account stopped posting entirely. And then there was Evan. He vanished from the internet the way a man ducks a punch instinctively, almost too late. The next morning before dawn, I heard a knock on the shop bay door. Not the confident rhythm of entitlement, but the hesitant one of someone testing if they're still allowed in. I opened it. Evan stood there, hair uncombed, hands jammed in his jacket pockets. No camera crew, no script. "I need to talk where no one can see me," he said. I nodded toward the wall. "Grab that broom." He blinked. "What?" "Start there." He hesitated, then reached for it. The broom bristles were frayed on one side, uneven like everything worth keeping. He began sweeping the floor slow, deliberate strokes. The heater rattled above us, same offbeat rhythm as always. We didn't talk. After a while, he said quietly, "They're freezing me out." I kept sorting invoices. Weather changes. You learn to work through it. He stopped sweeping, looked at me. "I thought if I just played their game, I'd make something better." I nodded toward the dustpan. "Clean corners, son. That's where the grit hides." He got back to work. The sound of the broom against concrete filled the room, steady and humble. Somewhere in the background of my mind, a hymn lyric floated up from years ago, from a service I hadn't thought about since the firehouse days. Let it be sufficient. Maybe that's what boundaries really are. Not punishment, not revenge, just enough space for something cleaner to start again. By the time the clock hit noon, the shop floor was clear, the air easier to breathe. Evan leaned on the broom, sweat on his forehead, eyes red but calmer. Some lessons have to be learned with your hands. The VFW hall smelled like floor wax and chili, the kind of scent that meant somebody cared enough to show up early. Folding chairs lined the wall, crock-pot simmered along a buffet table, and beside the podium sat Ruth's photo, framed and steady, a boot full of carnations placed next to it like an old ritual no one needed to explain. Evan stood near the back, hands twisting around a paper cup of coffee gone cold. He looked younger than I'd seen him in months, maybe because he wasn't pretending to be older anymore. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," he told the commander, voice low. The commander, a man who'd seen more battles than birthdays, stared for a long moment. "It's your name," he said finally. "You carry it how you want." Evan stepped up to the mic, eyes finding mine for half a second. I didn't move. Leadership sometimes means staying seated. He took a breath, then said, "I told people my father was outdated. I was wrong." His voice didn't shake, but it wasn't smooth either. "I borrowed other people's shine and called it ambition. I signed things I didn't understand because I like being important. I let people use me, and I let that hurt others. I'm sorry." No grand gestures, no piano music swelling, just words, simple and unadorned. A veteran with sleeve tattoos in the second row leaned forward, arms crossed. "Fix it with actions," he said quietly, "not microphones." Evan nodded. "Yes, sir, I will." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and set it on the podium. "I've started reviewing every invoice I signed under Whitmore Holdings. Anything overbilled, I'll repay personally through escrow. I don't expect applause, just a chance to make it right." Someone coughed. Another shifted in their chair. Then the commander walked up, took Evan's hand, shook it once. No smile, no ceremony, just acknowledgement. In this room, that's as close to forgiveness as a man gets. We spent the rest of the night stacking chairs. Evan stacked more than anyone, silent, steady, sleeves rolled up, the work unglamorous and grounding. I carried tables with him, the weight familiar, almost comforting. The exit sign flickered above us, red light pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to quit. While we worked, I caught myself watching the small human gestures, the way one of the older vets nudged a chair into place for a man with bad knees, the way someone quietly replaced Ruth's carnations with fresh ones from their own coat pocket. Ordinary grace. At one point, Evan paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You think they'll ever forgive me?" he asked. I handed him another chair. "That's not the point. You fix what you can, you live the rest." He nodded. Then he got back to stacking. When we finished, the room looked cleaner than it had when we started. Chili pots cooling, lights dimming, voices soft. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. Forgiveness here doesn't come with speeches. It starts with paperwork and ends with behavior. As I turned off the lights, I glanced at Ruth's photo one last time. The carnations had already started to lean, petals curling at the edges, but they still held their shape. Some things, I thought, don't need to bloom again, they just need to last the night. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you, and where are you listening? The Armory Hall looked different in daylight. Less like a place where truths detonated, more like a room meant for rebuilding. Potluck tables lined the floor, foil pans steaming, paper plates balanced on folding chairs. Kids darted between boots and coats, chasing each other through laughter that didn't need permission. Someone had taped a sign near the entrance. "Community luncheon. Bring what you can, take what you need." It felt right. I stood near the podium the VFW had borrowed from a school gym, Omega heavy on my wrist. My crew's gift. Not a symbol of status, just time well served. A reminder to keep steady count. When it was my turn, I didn't start with gratitude or history. I started with boundaries. "The Hale name," I said, "is not for license or leverage without consent again." My voice carried enough to still the room, but not enough to echo. "The crew's contracts moving forward will include dignity clauses written and signed. Respect is not negotiable, and the motel scholarships will double next year. Service pays forward, always." People nodded. Not applause, just quiet agreement. The kind that means something will actually get done. Near the back, Evan sat with his hands clasped between his knees. No phone, no entourage, just listening. When I spoke about legacy, I saw him tilt his head slightly, as if fastening something in place. "There's one last thing," I continued. Our family trust has been updated. If anyone, myself included, tries to use this name for coercion, for optics, for gain, that share diverts automatically to the community fund. A few murmurs rippled through the hall, the sound of understanding disguised as approval. My attorney slid the single-page bequest clause across the table beside me. I signed it in front of everyone, pen scratching softly over the paper. The notary's stamp clicked down like a period. A reporter from the local paper approached as I stepped off the stage. "Any comment for the Whitmores?" she asked. I met her eyes. "No." She blinked. "Nothing?" "Nothing," I said again. It was the kindest answer I had left. She nodded, lowered her recorder, and stepped back. That silence would say more than any quote. Later, when most of the food was gone, and the laughter had thinned to a comfortable hum, Evan came over. He stood for a moment, not knowing where to start. "I want to earn a seat again," he said, "not take one." I looked at him, then at the dent in the armory's metal door, a mark from some long-ago basketball game, left there and never fixed. Proof that a place can stay useful even when it isn't perfect. "Bring your boots at 6, I said. He nodded. That was enough. We spent the next half hour loading coffee urns back into the closet, folding tables, tying up trash bags, simple work that filled the air with the soft rhythm of completion. When the last light went off, the room settled into its natural quiet, a peace earned, not declared. As we stepped outside, the winter sun hung low, turning every dented car and frost-glazed window into something almost beautiful. I thought of Station 17, of turning the keys one last time years ago and locking the door behind me. Endings aren't clean. They're maintained like legacies, like names, like tools you keep sharp so they can still build something good. We left the armory the way we found it, no spotlight, no anthem. Just the steady sound of boots on concrete and the promise of work waiting at dawn.